Welcome to Science versus Pseudoscience. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth debate. If you'd like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they're live, and there's also a PayPal link in the info box below the video. Now we are joined for a veritable feast of logical fallacies. We are joined by John, otherwise known as Quantum Eraser. How are you doing, John? Good to have you.
How's it going today, sir?
Very well indeed. Excited for the show? Pressure's on.
Yeah, I was thinking about maybe delaying this, man. Maybe about 20 minutes. Nah, let's make it till Saturday, man. I just don't feel like it.
No way. I wanted to do this at the end of the last show, and you were like, no, it's got to be a separate show. Which I agree, it has got to be a sort of a self-contained show. So I'm pleased that we are doing it separately. But by the same token, I've been really keen to go over them because I get very excited about logical fallacies, as strange as that may sound. So a quick shout out to Steve HV, who covers this subject extensively, and he does a lot of logical fallacies on his channel. But John and I are going to do our own version of that, hopefully a little bit more detailed about the overriding fallacies that we all get faced with in this debate about Flat Earth. I know a lot of the examples have been tied to Flat Earth quite beautifully, haven't they, John?
Yeah, there's a lot of logical fallacies out there. In fact, there's over 250 common logical fallacies. So if we were to go over each one, I mean, it would be from here to Christmas, man. So there's a lot of them. And I probably should apologize for being myopic in my view because it just hit me the other day. I was just putting together the Flat Earth Proofs presentation, and I said, you know what? We should do a presentation on logical fallacies. And I passed that on in a Skype message. I thought Skype was going to explode. but yeah, there's a natural affinity for some people. We're not mentioning any names to studying logical fallacies. It's important.
It's I can't remember who was saying this to me, but it's finding out where the fallacies lie that leads you to the truth. It's probably you.
Yes, because if you know what the logical fallacies are, then you can tell what's right. Right? It's an ipso facto sort of routine here. If you know what's wrong, if you paint a canvas wrong, then you sort of know what's right. Follow?
Absolutely. I mean, we had this discussion on the show the other day where someone was saying just because you point out that someone is fallacious in their reasoning doesn't necessarily make the other point of view correct. And the retort was basically, you're not making an assertion if you're taking apart a logical fallacy, but if you are presenting a contradictory, at least contradictory to the fallacy, point of view, yes, that's correct. It doesn't automatically make your position correct just because you pointed out a logical fallacy.
Yeah, that sounds pretty stupid to me. I wasn't following that. Listen, if somebody makes a claim and their claim is based on a fallacious argument, that means the premises leading to that conclusion are fallacious, then the entire thing is void. Duh. So I don't know who was saying that.
Well, no, that's correct. That is correct because you're taking apart the assertion. But the point that was being made was that, let's say you've got three people on a panel, one's a globe earther, one's a concaver, and one's a flat earther, and the globe earther makes an assertion, and the concaver takes that assertion apart based on its logical reasoning. Well, that doesn't make that person's position automatically correct, is kind of what they were getting at.
Yeah, well, that person doesn't have a position. He's not making a claim. He's just tearing down the other person's argument. So that's non sequitur right there, man.
Fair enough. I agree. I mean, it's not just... I do agree, but I also don't agree because of the logical fallacy. So maybe we're straight into it, aren't we? So the fallacy that just because you've used a fallacy doesn't make what you say incorrect.
Yeah, but does it make it correct? That's idiotic. I think there's a lot of miscommunication here. The person making the claim, right? If that person uses fallacious reasoning to support the claim, then the whole thing is void. End of story, period. Right?
Yeah,
Because there is
the
no
assertion being
evidence.
made, yes, the assertion that is being made is void.
Right? The entire thing is void. Right? Not that there's some other truth floating around out there in the ionosphere that the conclusion is true somehow. You have to show evidence supporting the conclusion. If you don't, if you use fallacious reasoning reaching that conclusion, then the entire thing is void. Period. I don't. Am I wrong?
No. It's an argument about the other side's position being automatically correct because you've pointed out a logical fallacy. That's the point, as opposed to taking apart the logical fallacy. Therefore, any claim based on that fallacy is automatically void. I do agree with you.
Yeah, but there isn't another side. No one's. The only person making the claim is the claimant. I'm not. If somebody presents a claim to me, an argument to me, I'm not making an argument, right? I'm not claiming anything. They're the ones that are claiming it. And if they use fallacious reasoning in reaching their conclusion, and again, the entire thing is void, right?
Indeed, you do.
I'm glad we got that out of the way. Yeah, yeah.
So where do we begin?
Well, let's begin. Well, like I said, this is the ball-tard tools of the trade. And listen, it's not only with ball-tards. I got introduced in the evolutionary, whatever that is, genre. And I'll tell you what, I was carpet bomb with them in the beginning. I was sitting there, listen, this doesn't sound right. And that's when I got really good at them, is to evaluate each of their claims, right? Because I knew that their conclusions were false. And once you know that the conclusion is bollocks, then somewhere in their premises leading to that conclusion, somewhere in there is a fallacy. And I treated it like a mystery, like a game. And I used to take hundreds of arguments. I had a little time on my hands, and I'd just go through all of them and pick out each fallacious appeal. And then once you do like 10,000 of them, you get really good at them. One or two can sneak through, but there's some trigger words that tell you, hey, be alert. Here comes a fallacy. Some are really overt. They just come right out with it. So the genesis of this started with me personally with evolutionists. They carpet bomb barrage these things, man. And the Baltards, I'll tell you what, you're a close second. In fact, I think you've taken over the overt part. You're number one, just to let you know.
Well, that might be a little known fact for the audience. So when you had your very first debate, it was with the Rumpus. Is that correct? It was your first debate in Flat Earth, I might add.
Yeah, it was about 1 or 2 weeks after I, came to the realization. I didn't know those guys, but they were out there on the circuit. I mean, you had all of them. It was usually, 10 ballers against one flat earther, and it was just a debacle, right?
But you didn't.
Yeah.
The point I was going to make, John, was that you didn't need to know the ins and outs of the rhetoric of Flat Earth to be able to take apart the heliocentric argument based on its fallacious reasoning.
Exactly. You got it. Precisely.
So that's basically the tools that hopefully, people will watch this video a couple of times and try and learn those triggers, because that's where I have success on the debates, exactly as John puts it. I'm just listening out for keywords, and as soon as you hear one of those keywords, you pounce all over it. And I'll get criticised for ending an argument too quickly. It's like, oh right, is it not good enough to rip it a new one immediately? You've got to climb that tree and mess around in the leaves rather than chopping the thing down. No, just identify the fallacious reasoning and rip it apart.
Yeah, and explain it. I mean, a lot of people, they don't even know. Everyone uses these logical fallacies. If you just talk to people, just randomly talk to strangers, man, you'll find that most of the reasoning is fallacious. I'm telling you, just try it. People use these. It's almost like I don't know whether it's a learned behavior. Mostly it is, because a lot of these arguments are just parroted, right? They don't put any research, any due diligence or scrutiny into the arguments, so they just parrot them, right? And they think they're good to go by just parroting these things. Well, they're parroting fallacies. And if you try that technique around me or anyone that's aware of these fallacies, you're in for a rude awakening.
Well, it's not just for the people batting away these fallacies. There's going to be a fair chunk of people in the audience who are on the other side of this argument, i.e. John and myself, obviously are flat earthers, and there's going to be people who are in the audience that subscribe to the heliocentric religion and don't appreciate that they are using fallacious reasoning to convince themselves that they live on a giant spinning ball. So it's going to be useful to those people who think, well, no, I've got a certain cognition, I know I'm right about this because, and then literally they'll give themselves a logical fallacy to convince themselves that the Earth is a spinning ball flying through space.
Agreed. I guess you can boil it down to, it's two things: ignorance and then parroting nonsensical buffoonery. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, those are the people that I want to hear from in the comments, the people that say, actually it's, and then give a logical fallacy. You know, because they're convincing themselves as much as, unfortunately, the people who come along and read their comments. You know, it's obviously true to them enough for them to write it down without actually appreciating that they're being fallacious.
Yeah, and it's a train wreck because they don't even know that they're doing it to themselves. See, yeah. They destroy their own position by their own words.
Absolutely.
I think that's why that you get a lot of how would you say, blowback from people, because what they do is they train wreck themselves, and then when you point out that they did it all to themselves, then that's a pride type of thing. So then you're going to get what you get. Right?
Yeah, especially when I've got no shame in calling it stupidity or ignorance or whatever other insult that goes along with it. And when you get the typical response, which we will get into in this show, which is ad hominem. That's an ad hominem. And I learnt this one from you. No, it's not an ad hominem. It comes along with a devastating example of your stupidity. So no, not an ad hominem, a demonstration.
Yeah, most of the people don't know what these logical fallacies are. That's what I said. They just parrot it, right? Ad hom, ad hom, ad hom. No, it's not an ad hominem fallacy. And then what I do is what I always do: define it, right? And once you define, they won't do it because once you define it, it doesn't meet the definition. But we'll get to that one. That's one on the list.
Was that my cue to share your screen?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okie dokie, I'll get you bring you up.
I thought it was already being shared, by the way.
No, it wasn't, but it is now.
Yeah, so like I said, the ball-tarred tools of the trade. And I'd like to stress it because I said it previously, that every single logical fallacy is a non sequitur. That means its premises or its conclusion is compromised by its fallacious premises. Every single logical fallacy is essentially non sequitur. It just doesn't follow, right? And I'll repeat it again. If you know intuitively that a conclusion is wrong or it's bollocks, somewhere in their premises there lurks a fallacy or multiple fallacies. So be careful out there, because it's real easy to fall into these. Real easy, especially if you're parroting what you've been told or what you read. Because a lot of so-called smart people, they're a fallacious ball bag, right? And we're going to point some of these out here. So do we want to get started?
Yeah, I'm ready when you are. I've got
All right, let's go with the first one.
Let's
reification.
Go.
See, go ahead. Did you have something?
No, I said let's go. Let's do this. I'm excited. I'm pumped.
Nah, let's delay it, man. Let's delay till Saturday. I'm not feeling it.
No, we're good. We definitely chewed up 15 minutes before the start. People are well prepped. We've got a good audience. Good 150 people.
All right. Well, ironically, let's start off with the reification fallacy. This wasn't even on the list. I mean, when I made up the list, at first I said, I'm not going to put this one on here. I mean, everyone knows, when people say science says or the body of science, they know it. And you're like, no, 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 put that in there. And it's so funny because, like I said, back in the day, evolutionists, whatever that is, they use this too, right? And I just superficially, looked up reification fallacy. You can look it up plenty of places, right? And that's just what it is, right? Just a simple definition right here. I never went into it all that much further, right? I never did any research on it because it is what it is. This is it. But when you said, "Oh no, let's go ahead and do the logical or the reification fallacy," I went in and looked into it a little bit more deeply, and I come out with something. Just hold on a second. We're going to get to it. So, a reification fallacy. This is when an abstraction or abstract belief or a hypothetical construct is treated as if it were a concrete, real event or a physical entity. It is when an idea is treated as if it had a real existence. And the headliners obviously are the science says, or science does this, science constructs, science does this. And listen, it doesn't do any of those things. Science is a concept. It's the scientific method. It doesn't say, it doesn't dance, it doesn't run, it doesn't jump, it doesn't do the hokey pokey, right? It's a method. It's not doing those things. That is a reification fallacy. Now, the reification fallacy is like an umbrella term. It has a lot of sub fallacies underneath it that are more specific. There's more specificity to some of these, anthropomorphism. I like this term, the pathetic fallacy. It's really juvenile pathetic. Personification, hypostatization, and those types of things, right? But everyone knows intuitively science doesn't say anything. And what do I get? Well, that's just a figure of speech. It's just the way people talk. Yeah, you're right. And this is okay. If you're writing poems or you're writing stories, right, then this is okay to describe, like, you could just pick any of the hundreds that you've heard before. Like, the sea was a, fickle temptress. Everyone, that helps give a better visual picture of the story. And there's no problem with that. The story's not fallacious because they use that. It's just a figure of speech, right? I'm not talking about rhetorical devices here. But when you use this as evidence for a claim, it's fallacious. That's the difference.
Yeah, the worst possible one is science says, because it immediately contextualizes it. So, like you say, if it's a figure of speech, that's perfectly acceptable. But when you put things into the framework of science, I know we'll get onto this later, but things like a test. If you're talking in scientific terms, a test is a hypothesis. So when you talk in terms of science and use a reification fallacy that is literally science says, it's the most infuriating type of fallacy there is.
Oh, yeah, I'd lose my mind, especially when I first come out here. I lost my mind with this. Jaron, science says. No, it doesn't. Doesn't say anything, right? And if you use test, if we're talking in a scientific context and you use test, a test is experiment. So let's see the experiment. What's the natural phenomenon observed, please? We're going to write down the steps with that, right? But like I said, be careful on what context we're talking about here. If you use this as part of your proof, as part of the evidence of your claim, it's fallacious. And your claim, along with your argument, is therefore void. So science says, if we wanted to get real specific with this, I just call it a reification fallacy. I would probably say it's a mix of anthropomorphism with hypostatization, right? But that's neither here nor there. It's just a reification fallacy. So let's go over this anthropomorphism. This is an error of projecting uniquely human qualities onto something that isn't human. Usually this occurs with projecting the human qualities onto animals But when it is done to non-living things, as in calling the storm cruel, the pathetic fallacy is created, right? So, like I said, you could categorize these under different subterms under the reification fallacy, but in the end, it falls under the umbrella reification.
So, for
Right?
example, if I'm talking about a cherry tomato that's suspended in oil, and I say that cherry tomato is quite happy where it is.
Yeah, I think you said it yesterday, and I said reification fallacy because of the happy cherry tomato. That cherry tomato's not happy. That's a human quality,
Indeed.
right? Now, back to the story where I said I had to do a little bit more research on this. And I said, you know what? Let's go to the Baltard's alma mater and let's look up reification fallacy, right? And guess what it gave me? Here it is. So listen closely, pretender clowns. Reification, also known as concretism, hypostatization, or the fallacy of misplaced concreteness, is a fallacy of ambiguity when an abstraction, that is, an abstract belief or hypothetical construct, is treated as if it were a concrete real event or a physical entity. In other words, it is the error of treating something that is not concrete, such as an idea, as a concrete thing. Are you listening? A common case of reification is the confusion of a model with reality. Oh, you're circling the drain at light speed, globetards. Every single time now that you bring up this term model, you're done for. Because what we're going to say is reification fallacy. And then we're going to point you to your alma mater. Wiki. I love it.
Yeah, I nearly spat my cornflakes out when you sent me this. So I read it, and obviously I was like, okay. And then I saw the link, but I didn't put two and two together that these are literally the words of Wiki. A common case of reification is the confusion of a model with reality. Quote, the map is not the territory.
Yeah, they're done. All they can do now, or all they can do then, after it's exposed, is no. Mine is a scientific model, right? Well, thank you very much. Natural phenomena observed, please. Hypothesis, please. Independent, dependent variable, please. Kaboom. So you're finished. We're sick of the fallacies. Every single argument you have is a fallacy. Every single one. And we're going to point it out every single time. Any more on this? I mean, I can't say any. It says it right there. I mean, I can't, break this down any further. We good right here?
Yep.
Oh, P.S. I call this the numpty num-dum fallacy. It's called the reverse reification. Treating concrete things as concepts. Trees are concepts, right? No, trees aren't concepts. Trees are freaking trees. Any questions on that? In fact, there's an online peer-reviewed source that I can submit claims to. I'm seriously considering submitting this under this title because it's exactly what it is.
I love the sound of it. Reverse reification. That just rolls off the tongue so beautifully.
And that's exactly what it is. So just to let you know, I'm considering doing it. When I get some time, I might write to them and say, hey, you need to add this. I'm sure there's a lot of fallacies, and this led me back to an incident that happened many, many years ago. Somebody, and I can't even remember the context of the argument, but I said, you know what? I thought to myself, I said, you know what? That's a reverse gambler's fallacy. And then I went and looked up gambler's fallacy, and I was trying to figure it out, and then I inverted it, and I said, yep, there it is. So a lot of these fallacies can be the reverse of it, the implied the implied meaning of the fallacy, it can be reversed in some cases. Not all, but in some. So that's what this reminds me of. All right, any questions with that one?
I think we're good.
So that's a reification fallacy. Be careful out there. Although this one is easy to sidestep, just be careful in the words that you use. All right, the straw man fallacy. This is where you attribute an easily refuted position to your opponent, one that the opponent wouldn't endorse, and then proceed to attack that easily refuted position, i.e. the straw man, believing you have thereby undermined the opponent's actual position. If this misrepresentation is on purpose, then the straw man fallacy boils down and is caused by lying. The quintessential example of this, and this has been recently, we'll use a recent experience of this, and it continues. I think I heard it yesterday or the day before, but the claim, scientific experiments are conducted to reveal the cause of natural phenomena. The fallacy comeback, how are we supposed to conduct experiments without man-made objects? So do you see the straw man here? This is a straw man to this argument because that's not what we're saying. I mean, it's ludicrous to even consider a physics experiment without some man-made objects in it. I mean, it would be impossible to do the experiment. I mean, it's preposterous. You see, the natural phenomena has to be natural. Or, better said, the dependent variable has to be natural. That's what we're talking about. Not that experiments can be conducted with without man-made objects. I mean, this is preposterous. This is an easily constructed straw man. See, what you do is you take the opponent's argument and you construct your little straw man from that argument, and then you set it on fire. And sometimes people are so confused that they think you've destroyed the argument when this hasn't been touched. Does everyone follow?
Absolutely, but it's just for the record. Let's take the fallacy itself to its conclusion, which is to say that if you are to conduct an experiment on a man-made object, so you've got the natural phenomena being substituted for a man-made object. Well, when you run the process, you very quickly discover that the cause is man-made it. Hence the reason you exclude them from the process, because you very quickly come up with your cause when you run it through the scientific method. Man caused it.
Yeah, on the surface, that's all these arguments are basically logically fallacious, and they're surface arguments. Once you dig Formica deep into the arguments, you're going to see that they're fallacies, and then you see how they don't logically follow. You're exactly right. I mean, all you got to do is say, okay, and I did it during the last presentation or during the science presentation, right? I said, okay, let's allow these crayon munchers to use natural phenomena as or man-made phenomena in the natural phenomena, or man-made objects for the dependent variable, the effect, right? So what's the cause of a man-made effect? Man, it's non sequitur. It doesn't even preposterous. Really preposterous. But this is a typical straw man. I mean, there's thousands, hundreds of thousands others you could do based on the argument you provide. People will just, misconstrue the argument and then make up their little straw man, burn it down. Right? So be careful out there. The straw man is used. I would say this is one of the most prevalent fallacies. Any questions on this one, or any more comments on this one, Nathan?
I don't think so. I think that's probably one of the few that people are pretty familiar with, i.e. building up an argument that's not to do with the original claim and then burning it down. So that, I would say, probably move on. I'm happy.
Okay. That was a good transition. A lot of them are mixed up with red herring fallacies. They're pretty close, straw man and red herring. So a red herring fallacy. This is a fallacy of distraction, and is committed when a listener attempts to divert an arguer from his argument by introducing another topic, or diverting attention from the real issue by focusing instead on an issue having only a surface relevance to the first. These are really subtle. They can be really subtle. You could just, wholesale bring another topic in, right? And that's easy to tell. But the surface relevance part, these can be very subtle and could fool a lot of people very easily. And the most obvious one, and like I said, it's most recent, the claim, please show gas pressure without a container. Well, the fallacy is, how do you account for gas pressure gradients? You see how this has surface relevance to the actual argument? What comes first, gas pressure or gas pressure gradients? See, we're asking you, where do you get gas pressure from without a container? You have to answer that question first before you go to the next question, gas pressure gradients. By the way, I have the answer to that in a closed system, by the way. Okay. So you see how this is a red herring fallacy. And I'll tell you what, even when you tell people, hey, this is a red herring fallacy, I don't know, they have blinders on or something plugging their ears because they just repeat the same thing, right? How many times have you heard this?
Oh, hundreds.
Yep,
hundreds
that's the
and hundreds.
only comeback to this argument. That's all they got.
Yeah, they get ever more complex in terms of how they try and weasel in an explanation for a gas pressure gradient. And it doesn't matter who they are, they're always weasels, they're always using a red herring fallacy and ignoring that we do have gas pressure. And in order to have a gas pressure gradient, you've first got to have gas pressure. So the question still isn't answered. Addressing how we have a pressure gradient doesn't address how we have gas pressure without a container. Red herring fallacy.
Yep, and can be, like I said, as soon as it's presented, voided. So don't get upset when we void your crayon muncher argument because it's fallacious. Follow? Answer this question.
I will do a specific shout out to Conspiracy Cats. So Conspiracy Cats has been asked this question and bypassed me and went to Anthony and basically detailed a mathematical formula, an abstract concept for how to achieve gas pressure gradients. Again, total red herring.
He did. He just talked about gas pressure gradients?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, it's red herring. Yep, it's just that simple. Stamp it and friggin' boot it. Good on this one?
Yeah, I'm good. Like you said, I often get the two messed up, as in I will call a straw man a red herring and call a red herring a straw man. And as you pointed out to me yesterday when I got it wrong, I'm not going to even attempt to make one now in case I get it wrong again, making me seem very silly. But it's the surface level relevance part that makes it a red herring. So it's not addressing the original issue whatsoever. It's not building up a new argument that's just completely different. It's surface level relevance.
Exactly. Don't beat yourself up over this. The straw man and red herring, they're easily confused. It's still a fallacy, so it's not a big deal.
Cool. Yeah, let's move on.
This is another coy one, the equivocation fallacy. This is committed when a term is used in two or more different senses within a single argument. And the easy one is that everyone does this. I mean, this is prevalent. You'll see it quite quickly. So scientific theories are the result of validated scientific hypotheses. This is correct. However, the next statement out of their mouths, my theory is that white dwarfs are caused by luminescent gerbils, right? See, this theory right here is not and doesn't have anything to do with scientific method, hypotheses, nothing. So you can see how people use this. I'm telling you, man, I get this a lot. Equivocation. This is probably the biggest word, theory, that's used for equivocation that I've run into. I don't know, maybe in your experience it's different, Nathan, but that's the biggest one that I see. This is an easy one.
Almost forgivable depending on who's using it because of that particular word, not the fallacy, the confusion with theory.
Right, because they're two different definitions. This definition is abject speculation. or
It's
just a
just,
conjuring.
it's not diametrically opposed, but they're pretty close, aren't they? I mean, a scientific theory is about as far devoid from a theory as you could really get, I would say.
Yeah, it is as far away as possible. Yeah, and it's real easy to try to give this some veracity by greasing the skids with this little thing, right? It's real easy, especially if they're talking really fast. It's real easy to do that. So you have to be careful with it. It depends on where you're at. If you're in a written form, it's a lot less easier. But if you're talking to somebody, they can rattle this off really quick, and you'll be like, what? And they'll be on to the next subject. Wait, let's go back to that one. So
Although on a tangent, I do want to expand on scientific theory. So you've got it summed up beautifully, obviously very concise and accurate. But we had somebody on the debate today that was detailing the second step of the scientific method, and he said theory. And I said, well, no, your theory comes long after you have got potentially a series of experimental tests performed that have been validated. So, as you put it, validated scientific hypothesis. Well, hypothesis tests are experiments. So to get a validated scientific hypothesis, you've got to perform experiments and have them actually validate your cause as the cause. And once you have more than one of those, you can put together a theory. But that theory has a very specific designation, a scientific theory, unlike abject speculation. My theory about white dwarfs, my theory about what gravity could be, my theory about the heliocentric ball is absolutely meaningless by comparison to a scientific theory, which could potentially be years and years in the making and a number of different validated scientific experiments to support that theory. Scientific theory,
perfect,
that is.
perfectly articulated. And remember, technically, scientific theories are not even in the scientific method. They're the result of the scientific method, to be technical about it.
Yeah, the antecedent is the scientific method.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. You got it. Yeah.
Anyway.
All right. Good on this one. I think
Yeah,
this is
so
pretty
maybe just because we went off on a tangent, can you just repeat that one again? Because we were talking about scientific theories more than the equivocation fallacy, which does bear repeating because it is, I'll reiterate one particular detail that you said that I completely agree with. People will do this when they speak quickly, and you'll miss it because they'll rattle it out fast and you won't notice. So that was the detail that I picked up on the most was how it gets used and abused is with people and their fast tongues.
Yeah, they'll say it real quick, and before you know it, you're on the third subject down from it, right? And wait a second, we got to go back to first principles. What did you say? That I always bring up. That's why I try to slow them down. They call it interrupting. I'm sitting there. No, I'm not interrupting. You can't. I'm sick of chasing fallacies, third, fourth, fifth order extrapolations off your fallacious premise. Go back and validate that premise first, right? So
Yeah,
be careful out there.
But that's what I said at the beginning of this, which is to say that I get criticism for ending an argument too quickly. And what you're describing is going down whatever route it may be, whatever fallacious argument you are pursuing, it's already been accepted. The fallacy has been in place while you're arguing about this concept or idea that's completely fallacious in its reasoning to begin with, but yet there's people arguing within that structure. And why not just cut it off at the legs straight away and identify the fallacy? Don't let them get 7 steps into the fallacy with their nonsense.
Exactly. You got it exactly. I'm a rate limiting step guy. I love rate limiting steps. It should be my mantra, right? Because I'm always looking for it in any situation. What is the rate limiting step? And it's easy from there. Once you do that, you just cut it off at the legs from that point. Why waste your time? It's just a waste of time. It's just verbal diarrhea after that. And the technical term is anchoring to fairy tales. Don't anchor to fairy tales, folks, because you go down with the ship. So make sure the premises are sound and are placed on a firm foundation. Good?
We're good?
Equivocation fallacy. Next one of my favorites. This one is abused, used and abused. I don't think quote mining would probably just beat this one out, but we're going to get to that one coming up here in a couple minutes. But ad hom fallacy, let's see what this is. Let's define this thing, right? Also known as personal abuse, personal attacks, abusive fallacy, damning the source, name calling, needling, refutation by character. Okay, now listen to this, folks. This is the punchline. Pay careful attention. Description: attacking the person making the argument rather than, are you paying attention? Rather than the argument itself. When the attack on the person is completely irrelevant to the argument the person is making. You see this part right here? This is a key part of this definition. So, claim scientific theories are the result of validated scientific hypotheses. Fallacy, you're a moron. What did he do? He completely disregarded the argument, and in lieu of any argument whatsoever, called this person a moron. See it? What's not a fallacy? If you come up with an argument and then I rip it to shreds in detail, going step by step, ripping your entire argument to pieces, and then in the end say, you're a moron, that's not an ad hominem. Follow? Because I didn't put the moron in lieu of an argument. The argument was already there. I used that as the basis of my conclusion. My conclusion is you're a crayon muncher.
So, as an example, you've got, if you take the claim and substitute it slightly and say, scientific theories are a result of what teachers say in schools. And then the reply is, you are a moron because scientific theories are a result of validated scientific hypothesis. So, in other words, it's not an ad hominem if you are pointing out that the statement made is moronic, making the person making it a moron. That's not ad hominem. It's backed up by their own nonsense. If I was to assert that scientific theories are a result of what teacher told me at school, I would be fair game to be called a moron, because that is a moronic statement. However, if you say scientific theories are a result of validated scientific hypothesis, and the response you get is, you're an idiot, that does not address the actual claim being made, just an ad hominem fallacy.
Exactly. It's in lieu of an actual argument, right? And you brought up another one. Now, ad hom is an umbrella term. There's a lot of fallacies that fall under this.
Well, can I add one that you didn't get in the list? So there's poisoning the well. I know you have got it there. Damning the source, you've called it.
Yeah, poisoning the well will fall under this. It's a preemptive ad hominem.
Yeah, so as an example, you say, I say now, tomorrow I'm going to have Dr. Krauss on to describe thermodynamics. And then the show ends and somebody releases a video saying that he's an adulterer and a tax cheat and all things that might well be true. Doesn't affect his discussion on thermodynamics. So it's poisoning the well. It's a preemptive ad hominem attack. In other words, you're attacking the person's character, not the information that they will present in future. So that's a poisoning the well fallacy or damning the source. Only that happens a lot, right? Yeah, we get it while the debate's going. I'm sure there's been some of these going by in the chat. I've been only keeping a half an eye on it, but I'm sure there's some in there. Right. But there's a lot of people, they'll say ad hom fallacy, when it's not an ad hom fallacy. People just don't know what they are. You have to define these things. So it cracks me up. I get charged with it all the time, obviously. So do you. But it's actually not an ad hom fallacy. In fact, it's a fallacy on their part. You know what it is? An ipsy-dixit, baseless bare assertion fallacy, folks. But that's pretty funny. I like the irony. Oh, so what you're saying is when it comes to somebody using the you're a moron approach without actually attacking the claim, that in itself is also a different fallacy called what, sorry?
No, the part where they say ad hominem fallacy but don't provide support for their claim, that is an ipsy-dixit fallacy. And
Okay.
ipsy-dixit just means he himself said. Just because you said it, right?
I've got you.
That,
So, in other words, I point out that scientific theories are not the result of talking to teachers. You're a moron. And the person replies, that's an ad hominem fallacy. And I point out, no, you pointing out that it's an ad hominem fallacy when it clearly isn't, is an ipsy-dixit fallacy.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, it is. Because now, he's got to support it. That is to say that this is all he wrote, or this is all he said, period, end of story. He didn't provide any support. So it's a lack of support for your claim. You just can't make a claim without support, right? That's what village idiots do.
This is why I love talking about logical fallacies, because just in the conversation and the reply and discussing it, we get a new fallacy coming from a fallacy describing a fallacy used incorrectly. Just brilliant.
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, it's just a generalized fallacy of non-support. Everyone does it, right? They make claims and they don't support anything. Whether, the nuh-uh argument, that's my favorite. Nuh-uh. Really?
The detail that must be stressed, and you've got it highlighted, is the rather than bit. In other words, if you use an insult that is not attached to a damning argument, then it's an ad hominem attack. If you describe somebody's stupidity and then detail to them directly that that is stupidity, therefore they are stupid based on what they have said incorrectly, that is not an ad hominem attack.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah. So we can move on from this one. Remember, folks, rather than, that is, you provide these in lieu of an actual argument. Simple as that. Rather than, in lieu of. Got it? Hope
Got it.
so. Here's another one that gets abused and people don't have any clue of what they're talking about. Let me show you. This is the appeal to authority, right? You've heard this many times, correct?
Well, it gets quoted wrong because you'll find a couple of different references to this that are incorrect.
Yep. Now let's go through it. Let's see if it logically follows. So, an appeal to authority fallacy. This occurs when the authority in question is not a legitimate authority on the subject. Fallacy. Dr. Craig Venter maintains that refrigerators violate the second law of thermodynamics. Right? Well, this is not a fallacy. Dr. Craig Venter maintains that the genetic code is the software of life. Well, Dr. Craig Venter is a geneticist, the geneticist of geneticists. He is an expert in the field, right? And he's speaking to the genetic code software of life. Now, let me just say this. If he makes these claims, there has to be some type of support for this claim. Even though he's a geneticist, right? You're following what I'm saying?
Yeah, we'll work under the assumption that it's not just throwing that sentence out. It's supported by a lifetime of work. That's the point.
Right. Let's just assume that for now so we can get through this. But the fallacy is, well, Dr. Craig Venter is probably not a refrigerator expert. He may know a little bit on the second law of thermodynamics, but this sets it apart. This is a fallacy because he is not a legitimate authority on refrigerators. Now, if this wasn't true, if it was just, that's just an authority, right? Then every expert witness brought into a court to testify could legitimately be objected to by the prosecution or the defense as an appeal to authority fallacy. There would be no expert witnesses allowed in court. Does that make any sense to you people?
Yeah, it's just to dumb it down a little. There's a movie called Billy Madison about a rather stupid person, and he goes to college and learns that many of the facts he's been taught by his mother are incorrect. So they start talking about, I think it's a crocodile's teeth or something along those lines. And Billy Madison says, Mommy says that the crocodile's sad because he's got all those teeth and no toothbrush. And that's a fact. Now, that's an appeal to authority. His mother's no expert in crocodiles, but she's given him the facts, and he's appealed to her as his authority. That would be an appeal to authority.
Yeah, I hope people catch on to this, because many people just begawk this. Begawk, appeal to authority. No, it's not. Most of the time, it's not. If I'm appealing to Dr. Craig Venter regarding genetics, or Niels Bohr or Werner Heisenberg regarding quantum mechanics, that's not an appeal to authority, crayon munchers. Duh. So I hope this is clear. This is pretty cut and dry. I mean, you could see once we follow it to its logical conclusion, you can see how this is exactly what this fallacy is. Any questions?
I don't know if you can back up what I said at the beginning, which is preemptively there will be comments that will say, I found a reference that says an appeal to authority is appealing to somebody who is in authority on the subject.
Well, like I said, I just destroyed it right here. Plus, what you have to do, look, just because you have a citation that states something doesn't make that citation true. It has to be logically consistent. It has to be sound. It has to be able to be supported, right? Just because somebody says something doesn't make it so.
No,
right? So
having something written down and being able to...
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, having something written down and being able to bring it up on screen doesn't make it so. And it's going to happen eventually, but there's going to be somebody who comes on the debate and says, look, here's a university that says science doesn't need to use natural things. It's not studying natural world.
Yeah, you'll find, I know which one it is, too.
Sure. Well, yeah. But in doing so, they have to then present their source. And in doing so, you have to study the source. And as you rightly so point out, you have to follow it through to its logical conclusions. So in this particular instance, they're talking about studying things like smiles. Now, if you're going to if you're going to claim that science doesn't need to study the natural world, science specifically doesn't need to study the natural world, and then claim that you are a scientist when studying a smile, then you're going to struggle to adhere to the scientific method itself. Therefore, the person making the assertion can be deemed or discredited based on the illogical nature of their claim when you take their claim to its logical conclusion. So yes, it's very easy for me to claim I'm a scientist if I can build a computer, right? I can take that to a conclusion that would convince many that I am a scientist by doing so, if I was silver-tongued enough. Not that I'm going to, but you get my point. But ultimately speaking, when I make my reasons for being a scientist when I've built my computer and then reference them online, even if I'm a university student or my paper has been peer-reviewed, you can still pick it to pieces based on whether or not it conforms to logic. Will it follow a decent logical outcome? If the answer's no, then that reference isn't any good. However, you pull up a different reference and the reference does follow logical steps to draw the same conclusion that you have drawn and are using them to draw in reference, then that's perfectly acceptable. That's what the debate's all about. Let's see your reference. Well, let's compare it to my reference. Does it support my argument or your argument? And so on and so forth. So it's not to say that just because you have a reference from what seems like a good source, that somebody else might not come along and have a better source or debunk completely what that person asserts. Anyway, that was a bit of a mouthful.
And I think studying smiles, that cracked me up. That is eerily similar to a source that I'm quite familiar with, because back in the day, every time I put the evolutionist up against the wall, and it usually happened in less than a Planck time, I'd always get bombarded by sources by one institution. Guess who that institution is?
I forget which it was. I think this one was Berkeley.
University of Berkeley.
Yeah, but this one was Berkeley.
I guarantee it, that sounds like them crayon munchers, man. Please, I want to have somebody from Berkeley come on the show, or one that's parroting Berkeley, and I want to see you put smiles in the scientific method. You friggin' pretender clown doofuses.
Indeed.
That's all I got to say about it.
I'm sure Berkeley's a very good university.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of departments at Berkeley that are outstanding, but their evolution department is a friggin' clown show. So bring it on. I just wanted to leave that because that's what it reminded me of.
Let's get back on. Let's back on our track. We have to reiterate what an appeal to authority is now. To that little side track.
Yeah, an appeal to authority is, if you're going to appeal to authority, just make there a little legitimate authority on the subject being discussed. That's all you got. That's all you need. And like I said, it's not the final end all word. Dr. Craig's like I said, Dr. Craig Venter's position right here, software of life. He needs to support that, and it's very easily supported. Just look at his work. Good.
Good.
Oh, I'll tell you what. I said a couple other fallacies were the most prevalent. I would have to say this is the most prevalent argument on the plane. This argument right here. It's called argument or appeal to ignorance fallacy. And since the Globetards have no evidence for their position, every single argument will be an argument or appeal in your ignorance fallacy. This is an argument for or against a proposition on the basis of a lack of evidence against or for it. The fallacy: dark matter is created by invisible three-toed gnome storing pixie dust in a black hole behind the Crab Nebula. Then this fallacy is always followed by what? The burden of proof reversal. Can you disprove it? Right? What they're saying is, if you can't disprove my frigging bollocks, therefore it's true. Well, you haven't proven this first, Crayon Muncher, right? Who does this? Who does this the most on the show?
Probably P. Mars.
Yeah, P. Mars is one. There's a lot of people. Well, can you disprove it? Right? Is it scientific or logical to imagine things, then have other people come along and try to disprove your imaginings before you give evidence of your imaginings?
Oh, we did this today. We had a nice little juxtaposition with Anthony and myself. Anthony started to assert that gravity was an upward force that displaces everything downward. Right? And then at the end of it, it's like, can you disprove it? Prove me wrong.
You know he did. Outstanding. Yep. Can you disprove that? You see how ridiculous it is? I put this, as farcical. I've had this for years because I think it's a good example. And everyone can see how farcical this is, and then see the follow on. Can you disprove it? Well, no. It's the acme of foolishness even to attempt to disprove complete argument from ignorance fallacies.
I do love it. I love it so much. I'm going to do the example again, just for any globetards out there that have a belief in gravity. So the assertion by Anthony earlier today was that there is an upward acceleration force that is constant and ultimately forces things to come down by displacement. So the question, based on this logical fallacy, would be: can any of you disprove that statement of absolute fact because we made it up ourselves?
You're right. No one's going to be able to disprove that. No chance. Exactly. You got it. I'm going to have to go back to listen to that. What was it? First or second show?
It's second show.
Yeah, I'll go back and check it out. Exactly. You guys got it. Yep. All right. Anything else with this one?
Nope. Three-toed gnomes. Nope. We're good.
Another one. Listen, I just keep on saying the last fallacy is the most prevalent one, and I get to the next one, and this is the most prevalent one. So listen, all these are just carpet barrage bomb. Let's just put it that way.
But this is my favorite. This is my favorite.
Right. So the circular reasoning or begging the question fallacy occurs when the premises include the claim that the conclusion is true or directly or indirectly assume the conclusion is true. The easiest one is West's Earth curve calculator gives accurate representations of Earth's curve. This circular reasoning just goes around in a circle, right? There's no end to it, right? It's fallacy. It's just that simple. Right? There's a lot of examples of this that I could come up with, but I thought that was the best one, and we could just end it right there.
Yeah, it's assuming the outcome, basically. So if you're trying to prove something, can you automatically assume it is the case, as the Earth curve calculator absolutely does? It says it in the title. It's an Earth curve calculator. So you've already got Earth curve. That should be the thing that lets you know you're begging the question. You're automatically assuming the outcome.
Yeah, haven't heard too much from him lately. Is he still around?
Mick West? Well, he's certainly still got a website with a begging the question, perspective hijacking, proof of nothing curve calculator.
Yeah, but I don't see any videos. No, it's not like I'm searching for him. I don't see any videos. I don't see in any comment sections or any discussions about the curve calculator. None. I ever since he came on the show and got embarrassed, I haven't heard any. Seriously.
Well, since then we've had Red Rhetoric calling me out and then packing up shop and disappearing. And the last questions I was asking to him was, where's your proof of R? Where's your proof of the Earth radius? So in the case of the curve calculator, the method it begs the question is by using a radius value. So the R value is automatically plugged in. You can mess around with the heights that you're at to take your observations, and you can mess around with the distance. And if you ever talk to a globehead, it's critically important that you get all of those figures right. But then ignore completely the fact that there's a radius value already that's there, that's automatically assumed, and will always be part of the outcome. So every single outcome, regardless, will always have a sphere. It's just nonsense. It's begging the question fallacy.
The Earth's a sphere. Let's go to the Earth curve calculator. It's right in the title. Right? It begs the question right from Jump Street. So, okay, good.
I think we're good.
All right, one of my favorites. This is the begging the question fallacy on steroids. And this is affirming the consequent, and I highlighted the form informal logical fallacy because it's based on its form. So it's really simple. If P, then Q, Q, therefore P. So, number one, the first example, if evolution is true, P, then you can insert any Darwinian grab bag post hoc observations, fossils, homology, similarity, genetic variations, etc. Q, we observe the post hoc observation, Q, therefore evolution is true, therefore P, right? Or, in our genre, if the spherical Earth with a radius of is true, P, we will observe differing elevation angles of the stars, whatever, Q. We observe differing elevation angles of the stars, Q, therefore the spherical Earth is true, therefore P. I mean, this is a train wreck, right? The logical fallacy is that P doesn't necessarily follow from Q. For example, if I had just eaten a whole pizza, P, I would feel very full, Q. I feel very full, Q. Therefore, I have just eaten a whole pizza, therefore P. Couldn't I have eaten a 20-ounce ribeye with fries or the old 96er? Right? Prove the spherical Earth first, crayon munchers.
This is another one that would come along with the burden of proof reversal attached to it as well. So the person who fell victim to this most recently, there's been many, was John Le Bon. Now, John Le Bon, I really like, and he's taught me a lot about logical fallacies, believe it or not. So big shout out to John Le Bon. I really do like him. I'm ribbing him, because it's necessary. But he fell victim to exactly this. So he would attach the burden of proof reversal to the end, which is to say, how can you flat earthers explain the southern star rotation? Now, in that question, it's really difficult to spot that there's an affirming the consequent formal logical fallacy within that burden of proof reversal. So the burden of the logical fallacy would go, if the Earth is a sphere, then you will see rotation in the star rotation in the southern hemisphere. So if P, then Q. If P being if the Earth is a sphere, then Q, we will observe southern star rotation. Q, we observe southern star rotation, therefore P, the Earth is a sphere. But then the burden of proof reversal will be, how do you explain this on a flat Earth? The assumption,
I love that. How do
the
you
assumption, so
explain
straight, so you're one step beyond. You're already assuming that the southern stars are underneath your arse for me in the north, not northern hemisphere. I add, but that would be the bit that drops the minute most of the time. So they say, well, when I travel to the southern hemisphere, so this is one that's difficult to spot because sometimes they'll only give you half of the formal logical fallacy. In other words, they won't necessarily, the person you're debating, that is, formulate it fully. So yes, it is a formal logical fallacy, but they might only give you half of it, and it's therefore that little bit more difficult to spot.
Yeah, I agree. And this is another one that sounds legitimate, right? But if you say it real quick, you can easily get away with this, right? Not around me, because this is the one I listen for. I'm out there, I'm waiting for it. There's certain fallacies that I wait for because people always use them, but you just got to practice at them, right? You'll hear this one a lot.
Yeah,
So,
so
we good on that one?
well, I'll maybe think of another one off the top of my head. So if I say,
Sure.
If my computer uses a quantum computing chip, then I can stream on YouTube. I can stream on YouTube, therefore my computer uses a quantum chip. Well,
Yep,
the one doesn't necessarily follow the other. But
yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, that's an easy one. There's hundreds of thousands that you could use. They're
Indeed.
easily spottable.
Yep, that's cool. I think we'll move on.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so we had the affirming the consequent form of logical fallacy. This is its nasty little sister, denying the antecedent. Again, it's a formal logical fallacy. It has form. So, if P, then Q, not P, therefore not Q, right? This is classic in the evolutionist, whatever that is, genre. Check this one out. If they are buried together, P, then they both existed together, Q. They are not buried together, not P, therefore they didn't exist together, therefore not Q. Idiots! This is in textbooks, friends. And you wonder why the scientific acumen of the U.S. is circling the drain at light speed? They use fallacies in kids' textbooks. This is a joke right here. Right? Do you guys see it? Hopefully you see it. It's very easy.
It's obviously it's a good logical fallacy, but it doesn't. I don't think it comes up that much in flat Earth. It certainly comes up a lot in evolution debates, as you point out in your example.
Yeah, I don't think it does. I'm waiting to hear one. Like I said, my antennas are not up for this one. I just thought I'd bring it in because it's the nasty little sister of affirming the consequent. Just
what about,
to juxtapose.
hold on, what about pressure gradients? Wouldn't that fall into denying the antecedent?
We'd have to try it. I'd have to look at it.
We'll have a look. Anyway, later on.
Some
other time.
Later on. Yeah. All right. My favorite. I'd like a little latitude on this one, Nathan. I'm going to spread my wings here. I'm going to love this. So, quote mining fallacy. This is quoting out of context. So, what does it mean to quote someone out of context? After all, every quotation necessarily excludes large sections of the original material and is thus an out of context quotation. What makes this a fallacy is that to take a selective quotation which distorts, alters, or even reverses the originally intended meaning. This can be done accidentally or deliberately. Now, let me tell you something, folks. People have no clue what a quote mining fallacy is. They don't. They just quote mining. I yearn. I mean, literally yearn for people to charge me with quote mining. I even put them out there, right? Number one, they're not quotes that I provide. Number two is you're clueless. You're so bankrupt that you can only parrot. You think your little hand wave dismissal, quote mining, is going to save you? It train wrecks your own position. You torpedo your own position because you don't know what you're talking about. So let me start off. Posting a citation with appropriate reference isn't quote mining. If it was, every frigging research paper with a bibliography or works cited page would be rendered void. Dumbasses. Let's pull one up. Are there 52 quote mines in this? This is Quantum Erasure with the causally disconnected choice from PNOS, right? Let's go down here, usually at the end, right? In the works cited, references, or bibliography page. How many quote mines? Oh my God. 52 of them. There's 52 in here, folks. I guess these are all quote mines, right? Because they're highlighted up here in the document. You know, parenthetically cited. Unbelievable. Right? Number two, the only way to quote someone is if a third party is quoted in a document. The citation will then read as quoted in. Duh. A citation with appropriate reference isn't a quote. It's a citation. I'll tell you what. I'm starting to get fired up. I'll tell you what. Let's go ahead and look up citation. Let's just do that. The definition of citation. Let's go to the wiki alma mater or the Baltard alma mater wiki. Let's go to wiki, and I don't want to search for this stuff. Going through these documents, it's boring. So let's find, right? You'd figure, heck, citation, it's going to be a quote, right? Let's check. Uh-oh, only one in this whole document doesn't mention quote once. What's up with that? Why is that? Huh? It only has it down here at the end of the document, the stupid wiki quote nonsense. Right? Unbelievable. So let's go up in this document. Let's get more specific. I know it's in here somewhere. Give me 1 second. Scientific citation. Let's try that same game. Scientific citation from the Globetards alma mater. Let's try our little trick again. Right, quote. Oh, misspelled it. Sorry about that. 0 of 0. People. Wonder why that is. Unbelievable.
Is it because science doesn't say? That's a reification fallacy.
Science. Did I say science says?
No. No quotes. Science doesn't have a mouth.
Yeah. So it's not, let me just say it again. A citation with appropriate reference isn't a quote. It's a citation. Number 3, when pretender clown fairy tales implode, they immediately appeal like Pavlov's dog, bagak, to quote mining. And like I said, I yearn for it. So get ready to reap the whirlwind if you haven't already. Crayon muncher. This is my response. And did you think you were done? You now have to support your charge. That means you have to show, as soon as you say quote mining, you now have to support that claim. You understand there's claim support other than village idiots. You understand that when you make a claim, you have to support it. Just because you say it doesn't make it so. You have to support it. So to support your charge of quote mining, crayon munchers, you have to show the actual citation, or quote as you call it, where and how each were taken out of context, because that's the definition of it. You follow? You want me to get the crayons out? I will, as long as you don't, if you promise you don't munch them.
Just out of interest, John, do you get accused of this quite often?
I get the dumb ones accuse me of it, but once they accuse me of it, they don't do it anymore. They get the wrath of Khan. This is the wrath of Khan. It's not over yet.
Yeah, I was just
Shall I
thinking,
continue?
check it out. My favourite, begging the question, got 2 lines.
Yeah, I'm sorry, man. And this
It's all
wasn't in
good.
the
I'm
original
just playing with
presentation.
you.
This wasn't in the original, man. You told me to put this in. It's your fault. So let's continue on this. So in that vein, I get metric tons of people that haven't even read the friggin' document in question and call it quote mining. How can they do that? They haven't even read it. They admit it. They admit that they haven't read it. They just say quote mine, right? What do they have? Special Evo mind powers or something? Right? How can they not read the context when this fallacy is taking it out of context? It's moronic. That's when I give them, I say, how in the world can you charge me with quote mining taking out of context when you haven't read the friggin' context yet? It's moronic. George Knucklehead, you know what we're talking about. Over a year ago, right? In that, remember you had George when he first came on. He had his YouTube video up with all his information in it. Well, if you scroll down in that video all the way down to the bottom, you're going to see my comment in there, and I challenged him for him challenging Brian Mullen unfairly, and it wasn't legitimate. And in there, guess what I brought up? I brought up the Coriolis effect, and I used the citation from Seagar Douglas. You know, the usual one that we use on the show. His first response was what? Quote mining. I said, what? What? I said, George, have you read this yet? Guess what his reply was? No. What a crayon muncher. I mean, just tattoo pretender clown doofus parroter on your forehead and be done with it. I mean, this is tantamount to running up to a police officer and charging me with robbing a bank. Then when he challenged you with who, what, when, where, and how, you just stare at him. Thanks. This shows beyond a shadow of a doubt that you haven't had the first clue what quote mining even is. Moreover, personally, I use a variation of parenthetical citation. Heard of it? It's practiced every day from fifth grade to the Supreme Court and is used extensively in scientific literature in support of claims, like we just looked at with the quantum eraser uh, choice that I posted earlier. Irrespective that this format isn't conducive to posting works cited pages, I don't want to have my posts or presentations longer than War and Peace, so I post the citations with the appropriate reference in the body of the presentation, right? I want to have it right there so we can see the whole thing right there. We don't have to go down to the works cited page. I'm not going to make a works cited page for a presentation. By the mere fact that you brought this up is alone a screaming testimony that you've never reviewed scientific literature ever. You wouldn't know what actual science was if it landed on your face, spun around, and whistled Dixie. And my usual, do you need any more gasoline with your matches? In that same vein. The next charge is, but in the very same reference, quantum eraser, you used, it says that astronomy is science. Unfrigging believable. I don't think these people ever graduated high school, to be perfectly honest with you. Did I cite it? If not, then I'm not responsible for it. Listen closely. If I post a citation discussing the crucial importance of the bond force constants in the water diameter, however, if within the very same reference, it goes on about how the bond force constants in the water diameters are created by invisible three-toed gnomes behind the Crab Nebula, throwing pixie dust in a black hole, and how they are the cause for invisible three-toed gnome calcium oxalate stones, that fact, number one, doesn't refute, render null, or impugn my citation or have any impact on it whatsoever. Number 2, doesn't denote that I believe that invisible three-toed gnomes exist or have kidney stones. Number 3, doesn't obligate me to explain, justify in any way, shape, or form invisible three-toed gnomes, crab nebulas, black holes, or calcium oxalate stones. Number 4, shows unequivocally that your clumsy, jacked up appeal is an incoherent, belly laughing, red herring fallacy from the Black Lagoon. In other words, Mr. Magoo, I'm only responsible for the citation. Duh. Welcome to 5th grade. Again, by the mere fact that I had to explain this to you, demonstrably reveals that not only you've never reviewed scientific literature ever, but brings into serious question if and how you ever passed high school. In other words, you're a demonstrated no-depth Wiki Discovery Channel parroting pretender clown muppet.
So that's the quote mining fallacy, is it?
Yeah.
Excellent. Clear as crystal.
Is there any questions on this? Because obviously everyone's heard this before. If you're a dumbass, you've charged other people with doing it, right? Without knowing what it was. Guys, please, please, please charge me with quote mining on the show. Please, I beg of you. Clowns.
Cool. Yeah,
Anything? Okay.
A lot of passion went into that. There was, I'm sure there was a cited reference that you've given me about 2 or 3 months ago where you explained it was as a consequence of somebody criticising you for using square brackets, and then you took me to a source that explained specifically how you're supposed to use these certain methods when referencing and citing things. I can't remember the source you gave, though.
Oh, yeah. I think I know what you're talking about. When you see brackets, like when you see, like if this appears in a citation, some word with brackets, let's say la la la, whatever. Anything in this citation, you can. Sometimes people like to take citations and just emphasize a point, right, or clarify a point. If you put this, let's say, I don't think I have any citations in this document. Let's say you see these brackets right here, right? This denotes, once you see these brackets, it is not a part of the original citation, that it's added to by you, the author that's explaining it, right? This is known. I mean, this is known in high school. Now, if you see parentheses, obviously, if you see parentheses in a word in parentheses, that means it's part of the citation, right? If the original author put something in parentheses. However, if you see a citation and you see something in brackets, this is called a bracket, that means that I have added to it, right? Is that what you were talking about?
Well, yes, but I was more talking about you took me to a reference that described it. I gave the sort of rules about where you use brackets and things of that nature, but that source also explained how you cite stuff. I just can't remember the source. It's just, I can tell you've poured your passion into this like yesterday, because it's not riddled with source citations all over it. But yeah, there was definitely a citation that you could have put in there. I just can't remember where it was because it was several months ago.
Yeah,
not to worry.
I have it somewhere. It's probably in my quote mining file.
It's not that important. It doesn't change any of the details that you've gone through on that particular logical fallacy about quote mining, but clearly you're very passionate about that particular fallacy, John.
Yeah, because I like to expose crayon munchers, because like I said in the beginning, when people make claims, right, that are so overt, moronic, right, they compromise their own position just by the words that they use. Like, you'll never catch a butcher asking you for a citation that ribeyes come from cows. You won't ever hear that. Why? Well, he's a butcher. He knows that, right? You see the juxtaposition? But we get crayon munching pretender clowns that this stuff is obvious to anyone that even graduated high school. I haven't been in high school for a long time. Let me just say it this way: Any first year university freshman knows all this apodictically. I mean, if you had an actual university freshman look over what I said, he'd say, yeah, I mean, what's the problem here? And then if it listened to most of these claims by the so-called academics, he'd laugh at them, right? There's nothing there.
Yeah, but
Right?
we've got
So
what you call pretender clowns. That's what we're dealing with.
yeah, they're wiki parroting pretender clowns. They just go to wiki and they parrot whatever's the headline, right? But as soon as you get into any depth whatsoever, they're lost. That happens. It happens. What?
I was just going to say, it could be the fault of the education system on account of the fact that we're taught to parrot stuff.
Yeah, that's true. We are taught. We're taught what to think, not how to think. Yep, I agree. I don't care to blame anyone. I'm not looking for a blame tree. If you come out here and you start pretender clowning, I really don't care the cause of that. You're a pretender clown. All right. Let's finish on up.
Yeah.
Let's finish on up. I wanted to pull an obscure fallacy, just one off the cuff. Go over this one. I like this one. It's the fallacy of irrelevant thesis. Have you heard of this?
No, I don't think I have.
Yeah. Well, this fallacy is arguing a point that's irrelevant to the subject at hand. Now, as soon as you see this term irrelevant, what family does this fall under?
I'm going to say straw man, and you're going to say red herring, aren't you?
That's exactly what I'm going to say. It's a red herring fallacy. Anytime you see the word irrelevant or diversion, it falls under red herring fallacy. But that's okay not to identify them. You'll be able to identify the fallacy. This one's real subtle. You'll like this one. Okay, this is an example. You're a reporter and you ask a sole survivor of a plane crash, how or why is it that he was able to survive? And he answers, because if I hadn't survived, you wouldn't have been able to ask me the question. Right? You see the problem with this? This is really subtle, right? But this is a fallacy. And like I said, it's a type of red herring. What he said is very true. However, he didn't answer the question. How or why he survived. He answered how he was able to answer the question, right? It's real subtle though, but you can see that it's irrelevant. It's a diversion. He didn't answer the question. And what this usually falls into, this is a bedrock argument of pretender clowns in the fine tuning argument of the universe genre. If you see anything hovering around fine tuning, you're going to see this argument, right? The question is, how or why is the universe fine tuned, not how or why you observe that the universe is fine tuned. This isn't one of my arguments. This is a fine argument, the fine tuning argument. It's really sound. It's just not the one that I've used. I like it though, but you're gonna see this response right every single time. Well, how is the universe fine tuned? Well, if it wasn't fine tuned, I wouldn't have been able to answer you. You're dumb. I mean, you knucklehead. You didn't answer the question. So it just strikes me as funny. That's why I wanted to add it. And it's pretty obscure. Most people have never heard fallacy of irrelevant thesis before.
No, but we definitely,
I thought I'd add that.
Well, yeah, but that definitely comes up on the debate.
You think?
I would say so.
I
can't think of a specific example.
Sure it does. Say again.
I was just saying, I can't think of a specific example, but I'm certain that will have been a methodology, a fallacious reasoning, not recognised before now, because I've not seen this before now. This is new on me, but yes, I'm pretty sure I could find an example.
Like I said, there's 200. I think I put 12 or 13 of them in here, so you got about 220 more to go of common fallacies. Too funny, right? Good luck. Good luck doing it. Good luck studying those. It's fun. Oh, I forgot. Finally, let me end it with this. Listen, somebody got wind that I was doing this presentation on fallacies, and uh, I was in a comment section a couple years ago, and I just deconstructed this gentleman's argument, right? My the typical way I do it. And we went from science, and then all his arguments were fallacies, and I pointed them all out, defined them, and showed exactly where and how he was being fallacious. So he posted this at the end of the comment thread, and I thought you'd enjoy it. He called it the John fallacy. It says, blah, 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 the scientific method, blah, 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 bold font, blah, 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 uppercase bold font, blah, 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 hypothesis, blah, 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 Aunt Sally, yada, 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 whistle Dixie, wibble, 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 pretender clown, shaking my head. So they sent this to me, and I thought it would be appropriate, and that I do have a fallacy, and it's this one. He did a really good job with it. So I thought I'd post it and share it with everyone. Oh, by the way,
just by example, right, just randomly scroll up to any point of your presentation now, just for comparison to what he's put.
Just randomly.
Blah blah blah. Bold font. That's brilliant.
I really enjoyed it. It cracked me up when he did it because I thought, wow, man. Well, at least he wrote something down. And
that's great.
The ironic part was, this is a fallacy right here. It's appeal to format style.
You're telling me there's a typographical fallacy?
No, it's not typographical. It's appeal. Yeah, it's called appeal to format or style, like style over substance, more or less, that vein.
Oh, right. In other words, if you make a really good point and it's riddled with spelling errors and grammatical errors, and you say, well, you can't even... I use that fallacy all the time, so I'm guilty of this. So someone will come and put up an argument, and because I can't be bothered to argue with them, I'll just put their spelling error, correct it with a star next to it. So it's a bit like that teacher where you say, well, what is the meaning of the universe? Or no, I've got to formulate it incorrectly. What's the... I can't even do it. It's hard to formulate a sentence incorrectly. What was you talking about, miss? In reference to what I just said. And the teacher, rather than giving you an explanation, would say, it's what were you talking about?
Yeah, right.
And then they ignore your question completely. So
my sister sees it. My sister's an English major, and when we were growing up, we couldn't. It was unbearable being around her because our English was horrible, right? Because we're Americans. She'd correct us every single time, drive us crazy. But anyway, back to your point. If somebody gave an argument and had a whole bunch of spelling errors, and you just concentrated on the spelling errors but not the overall content of the argument, that would be a fallacy. Even though he had a lot of spelling errors, it's good for him to correct those. But that's not appeal to style or format, because that's a grammatical type of thing. This is just style and format, right?
Gotcha.
And he got a couple other things wrong. It's not Aunt Sally. I can't remember who wrote this to me. It's not Aunt Sally. It's Aunt Jenny, and you're a Sally. So make sure you get this right next time, whoever wrote this, man. I sure hope he's listening, man, and somebody take credit for this. Because like I said, they emailed this to me, but they didn't put the author. But this is really good, man. I really enjoyed it.
Superb.
So listen, that's all I got, man. But logical fallacies, yeah. Learn them, and more importantly, learn not to employ them, because we're gonna catch you and expose you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
and no more criticism for pointing out a logical fallacy early. If you catch them early, why not?
No, that's very valid. I mean, you want to catch them early because you don't want to end up in an argument that you're anchoring to a fairy tale. You're destroying points 3 and 4. Steps removed from the actual fallacy. They have yet to support that. So why waste your time? I got better things to do.
Well, I'll give you the perfect example of this to round it out on. So this was always my argument, and it kind of disagrees with your point, but you'll understand why when I get to the end of my explanation. So the begging the question, proof of nothing, perspective hijacking curve calculator is a logical fallacy. Now, for me, pointing out that it begs the question and assumes radius is the end of the argument. That's it. It's a begging the question fallacy. Now, Anthony, for his crimes, wanted to explore the fallacy 2 or 3 steps down, how it actually exploits the calculation to convince you that what is actually perspective is Earth curve. He wanted to figure that out. And the only way you can do that is to work within the confines of the logical fallacy. Now, for John and for me, that's enough to make you want to go mad, just send you bananas, because you're working around a premise that you already know is fallacious. So we're already working on the premise that we're on a sphere, so we're all standing on a sphere while we have this conversation right now, and we're working how it doesn't work whilst standing on a sphere. So even if we figure out how it doesn't work, we're still standing on a sphere at the end, we haven't beaten the argument. You know, it's so pointless. However... Yeah, sorry, just one little bit more. So, however, by doing so, it meant that the calculator ended up being labelled as such. So it wasn't necessarily the case that the recognition of the perspective hijacking part. Now, that came from John. So John and I, both guilty. I don't want to do this. Just point out that it's a begging the question fallacy. Let's stop arguing about this is nonsense. However, we were calling it at one stage a perspective omitting. And it's not a perspective omitting calculator, it's a perspective hijacking calculator. It is just doing perspective. That's what it's doing with a few label changes. And but for the fact that we went through the logical fallacy and allowed our opponents to beg the question, we wouldn't have had that beautiful moment with Mick West. Very embarrassing for him, glorious for us. But that came from begging the question, allowing our opponents to actually work within this framework. Now, I would just say to anybody, unless you are doing it for the purposes of investigation to figure out where the fallacy ticks or how the fallacy ticks, then just end it immediately. Don't beg the question with them. Just say, this is a logical fallacy. You've assumed your outcome. End of story. So there we go. That's my little explanation for some benefits occasionally, very rarely, for figuring out how the fallacy works. You must allow them to beg the question, as much as it pains me to say it. There we go.
You want to drive me off the friggin' edge? Go ahead and ask me to go ahead and beat that dead horse again. Yeah, because I don't do that. It's one of my refrigerator rules. If I killed a horse, it's dead. I'm not going back there. Now, it can be fun following the fallacy and destroying the sub-fallacies under the main fallacy, because if it comes from a fallacy, every single extrapolation from it is, guess what? Fallacious. End of story. Thanks for your ear. Have a nice day.
Excellent. Well, I think I'll round out on that beautiful note, John. First and foremost, a massive, huge, enormous thank you to you, John. It's been a real pleasure, as always.
It's my pleasure and honor, sir.
Oh, no. My pleasure, my pleasure. And, of course, a massive, huge, enormous thank you to all of the live audience for tuning in and hopefully sharing this discussion. If you hated the show, you know exactly what to do. You've probably done it already. But if you like the show, maybe consider sharing it with a friend or subscribing if you've not done so already. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.